Hey, welcome to episode 42 of Nobody Told Me with Mike and Blaine. And I'm Mike Mylan, also known as Cashflow Mike. I'm here with my partner, Blaine Birch of Dry Run. Hey, Blaine, what's going on?
Oh, not too much, Mike. I had to go. I always forget. I got to go over to YouTube and hit mute. Otherwise, I've got this delayed conversation in my ears from there. So, no, doing good. Excited to jump into this topic. But before we do that, what do you got drinking? What are you drinking today?
Yeah. So, those of you, if this is your first time, we've been doing this live thing for just a short period of time. There's three things we cover. We cover business, we cover beer, and then because there's beer in business, there's a fair amount of BS that goes along with that. So today, Blaine, I'm doing Colorado today. So what's funny, this is Boulder beer out of Denver, Colorado. I would think it would be out of Boulder, Colorado, but Denver, I guess Boulder is pretty close to it. But an Irish Blessing. So it's a stout beer, but it's aged in a Jameson's Irish whiskey soaked oak chips. So that's a lot to say.
Nice.
But anyway, I'm expecting a little bit of a whiskey kind of flavor, just permeate just a little bit. So, but in a coffee stout. So, I mean, I'm going heavy on a hot day. Heavy on a hot day.
I'm a little jealous because that just is so up my alley with the barrel aged stout. That sounds terrific. I went a little lighter today, so I went with Two Crows Brewing, a classic dry stout. So I'm on the stout kick with you, but it's only 4.1%. So it's almost like a light beer, but for a light beer, it's delicious. And so Two Crows is out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, east coast of Canada. It is a terrific city. I love Halifax, and haven't been there in a few years, so I haven't been to the brewery, but I'm guessing they're probably downtown or something. So.
You know, it's funny. This is it's a 6.9, so it's kind of average. Right? It's not bad. But my first taste, I mean, I feel like it's a Starbucks cold brew, right? A nice coffee. Yeah. I mean, it's really nice. It's really
nice. Oh man, that does sound good. We both got a couple of good stouts today, so this is actually really nice. Nice, light alcohol, but a really nice rich stout in the tradition of Guinness. So it's quite good.
So I've got Boulder beer. You get what? Two Crows? Is that the
Two
word?
Crows.
Two Crows. All right. So Boulder beer and Two Crows, who we're talking about today. And if you have a craft beer out there and you want us to talk about it and you want us to taste it and you want us to think about, how wonderful it is and your introduction to the world, go to our site and buy us a beer. Guess which one we're going to buy? Yours. We're going to buy yours if we can find it. If we can find it. And then of course we'll talk about it and highlight you. And to date, 42 episodes. How many people have bought us a beer, Wayne?
42.
No, zero. I mean, two.
Man, I was just gonna maybe we can bullshit it a little bit here. That's the BS part. Every episode someone. No, okay. To date we've had zero.
I've only had one person buy me a beer, and that's me.
Yeah, that's the same on my side, unfortunately. So hopefully we're gonna get one of these days. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe we got to start BSing a little bit about that. So there's that. It's like, oh man, I got to get in there.
Somebody's going to find out. Either we are the absolute worst salespeople in the world, or people are screwing with us. I can't tell which.
It might be a little of both.
All right. So the other thing is that this episode brought to you by Dry Run. And full disclosure, Blaine Birch is the CEO of Dry Run. So, hey, tell us about it.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike. We are the sponsor. And you know what? Dry Run, cash management, financial modeling software. It is in the last month even gotten much, much more critical for businesses. The world's turned upside down, especially for startups that have equity investment. It's hard to get investment. Knowing your cash flow, modeling out your future, making decisions that are informed on data and understanding where you're going is so critical. But we always recommend that you have a finance pro kind of watching your back. So, we have CPA partners, CFO partners using Dry Run that can also help you if you're a business owner. They can also hop in and help you as well. So come check us out at dryrun.com.
Right on. All right. So speaking of cash flow, right, today's topic is really intimate to cash flow. right? Because we're going to be talking about customer mix, customer concentration, and finding that right mix. Because if you don't have it, there's a lot of risk to your company. All right.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about there?
Well, yeah, like that was something that we've battled for a long time with Dry Run to find like what is the right customer. And I think we've talked about that before, like identifying your perfect customer and identifying that niche and going hard after that niche, going hard after that vertical, and how important that is. But when we're talking about a mix, it's like, today we don't have a single solitary client or sort of customer meta. We have 4. And so within those 4, we have this mix and we know how we have to reach out to them, like who our sales team is focused on. And you get this delicate balance of how you are moving all these channels forward, but also where do we want to go in the future? So the channels today might look like, they're staggered this way, but where we're going in the future, they may start to flip, like we're starting to predict where that's going to go and how that mix is going to drive us forward.
Well, you know what? One of the reasons why I got into software was because the customer mix problem was easier, because you may have 1, 2, or 3 different packages, but pretty much everybody self-selects and goes into it. So you don't have one customer that is just overwhelmingly the most or the majority of your revenue, right? When I built that staffing company, that was the huge thing. And when I talk about risk, I'm thinking about, okay, I have a Marriott. I have a Marriott that gives me 75% of all my revenue, which means they quit me. If they just fire me next week because they don't want to use my service again, I lose 75% of my business, right?
Yes.
So that's the mix I want to talk about today is, not necessarily in SaaS because like Netflix, everybody pays the same, right? We're all paying, whatever it is, $15, $20, $19. I don't even know what it is anymore, but everybody pays the same. So because you have a lot of individuals, one person leaves, it doesn't hurt the company. At Dry Run, I'm sure it's the same. One person leaves, it doesn't necessarily hurt the company.
No.
I want to talk about today, like early on, you might have only 1, 2, 3 customers, and they encompass 100% of your business.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying there. And I just had to put my focus on so my Slack channel wouldn't bing in my ear every 30 seconds. It's an interesting thing because it's there's the side where you have volume and you're going to get like, how do you get 1 million customers? How do you get 10,000 customers, 15,000 customers? And then there's that other side and that's a challenge in its own. That volume is such a challenge. It's a lot of times easier to get one big customer than 100,000 little customers, just depending on what you're selling. But like you said, one big customer and it's all your eggs in one basket. And it's not like that hasn't been a problem with Dry Run because we're kind of in the middle. We have volume, but we like with our pricing and that we can go, we don't need 1 million customers kind of thing. With my last company, with the creative agency I owned, that was always a little bit more of a delicate balance because we would get some contracts with a large client and they would sort of keep bringing us more. And there was some follow-up stuff and it would just inevitably like, geez, we got a lot of our revenues coming from this one client. And what if that tap ever turns off? And in fact, that's what we found in 2009. Like that's when we had a lot of government contracts and they turned off and it was like, oh, we got to shift gears right now. And, we also wanted to find, like we replaced them with some other big contracts, but it's like, yeah, you got to fill that in because you have to have that constant cash flow going through. You have to have everything moving. It's hard with one big client. You have big, some middle, some small, and you can fill in all the gaps and you can just get a real nice engine going. And if someone leaves, you're not completely hung out to dry.
Yeah, and that's the hard part is getting there. But that's one of the reasons why I like a SaaS-based business is because again, all you have to do is start filling the pipeline with value, right? And it really, all right. So I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there is a perfect mix, right? When you talk about businesses, they say there's a perfect mix, and what it is that no one customer. This is the rule. So write it down. If you're listening right now, write it down because this is the rule. No one customer should be more than 8% of your business.
8%.
8%, right? So,
Yeah.
and if you can attain that, you've kind of mastered your customer concentration, which means if they leave, it's easy to replace that, right? So,
Yeah.
8% is kind of that threshold of when you give them an invoice and you add up all your annual revenues,
Yeah.
that their total invoices shouldn't be more than 8%.
That's interesting. I did not expect, I honestly, that surprised me. I was expecting that to be a higher number. Like I know in our service into your creative agency, we definitely had ones that were well above like 8%. I don't think it was ever like above half or anything, but we would have, and I don't know, I have to go back and look at our books, but there was double, triple that easily, if not more for our biggest clients.
Yeah,
Right?
but just think about them leaving, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm a smaller company and I'm living on, $300,000, and now you're 20% of my business.
Yeah.
Well, that's $60,000 gone. I'm down to $240,000 business in one swoop.
Yeah.
If it's 8%, well, then it's only what's 8 times 3? 24,000. Yeah.
Took me a second. Two finance guys, and we're staring at the what is it now? Where's my calculator?
Where's damn Excel when you need it? But I'm saying 24,000 opposed to 60,000, right? I mean, it just it limits the exposure and it's easier to overcome. But that means if your largest customer is at 8%, all the rest of them are just kind of, you can mix them in and out. So that's kind of if you're out there and you got 10 customers, you want to have them all, under that 8% if you can get it. Now it'd be hard to do, right? But
yeah, the other side of that though, that what we found is those little customers cost so much more money than the big ones. So that's the other side of it. So like if you're a really big business, that might sort of work out. But let's say like you're talking about a $300,000 business, like there's not a lot of room to move on that. Like you're pretty thin. But if you start looking at $300,000 business and if you have a bunch of clients that are 2%, 3%, in fact, you have a client that's 24 grand, it's tough because every one of those clients, it's like, you got to have those conversations. Like a SaaS product is different, but if you're a service business, each one of those clients is you have to have those client relationships, and you have to have like your kind of your proposals and your contracts and your invoices. And there's all this stuff that goes with it that it's almost like you have to get that critical mass. So if you're a $300,000 business, it might be like, yeah, you know what, build that off a client or two, and then get to where you have enough revenue that you can have, even those small clients that are 10% are like, yeah, it's still decent. Like, I guess what I was saying, like we had our minimum. And so that was the other side of it as well. We had a minimum contract value or customer value over the year, not always contract. It was brand new as a contract that we would maintain because it was just too much effort, too much work, just not profitable to have two small clients. And that minimum just kept going up and up and up and up. And so, you're getting into the 5 figures and then the 6, and you're just kind of like, okay, that's what we need to be able to sort of do both, right?
I would agree with that. I'm okay with the minimums, right? Because sometimes, especially if your fixed costs are higher, which means getting the project started, getting up and running, you've got a front end investment on that, right? I mean, you really do. But there's a philosophy out there that says any project that contributes to operating expense is worthwhile, right? I mean, meaning if there's a contribution margin, which means you don't lose money, it actually contributes to your operating expense, it's actually worthwhile. Meaning that once the fixed cost of that project are covered, and there's still a little bit extra for the operating expense of the company, it may be worthwhile to do it, especially during lean times or slow times.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I would say like you got to be really careful with some of those. And I would be like, the minimums were one of the big things. We also, we had different types of like back in our agency days, we had different types of contracts and sorry, good.
I'm just saying, we may be saying the same thing, which means for you've got a minimum. How'd you come up with a minimum?
Usually it was like, didn't make any money off of that. We're not doing not doing that again. And they'll go, you know what, we're having a minimum and it's going to be this. And then, then it's like, then it just starts climbing up and up. And pretty soon it's like, no, you just realize it's like, you know what, to go through all the work and with our team and you got like, you got to do the contracts and the project manager doing this now. It's like, it's just not worth it under a certain level. Right. But you also had to have cash coming in the door. So we had different types of contracts. So we had this kind of like our normal projects. And then we had these anything for a buck projects. And sometimes that's where you'd break that minimum because you're like, you're still going to make payroll. And for whatever reason, we're slow this month or this job doesn't start for a while. And it's like, as long as it's bringing some cash in the door. And then the third one we used to call our Halo projects. These are the ones that where it was a high profile job with a high profile client or a high profile something, or it was, we were building some really cool technology or something that you could tell those projects that one's going to move us forward as a company. It's going to really enhance our reputation, our portfolio, open up a door to these types of clients that are further up. So that's kind of how the three that we had classified. And the ones we hated, of course, were the anything for the buck ones, right?
Yeah. So I can understand. I mean, so in the hotel staffing business, I had the larger clients that might have upwards of 60 employees working at any given day, right? Mm-hmm. Just they're there, they punch in and out on my time card though, and I get an invoice or timesheet at the end of the week and I create an invoice out of it. But what I liked about the smaller ones is that when I would regularly run 60 people in a big, in a big hotel, yep. If they had an off week where they didn't have 90% occupancy, maybe they had 50% occupancy and they only needed 30. I had all these little smaller ones that I could farm people out to, right? Yeah. And give them hours, because what it did for me is it helped reduce, turnover. Yeah. And that was the biggest thing. Cause I mean, the hotel couldn't guarantee 40 hours. I was pretty much able to guarantee, 35, 40 hours to everybody across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting thing. Cause it's similar in the way with some of the larger projects we would have, you would always have these little sprints, and then you'd have delays for every reason. Like we can't book the photographer. We got to do some filming, but we have to have this person at this location. And it's always delays and things. You can't have your office idle and you can't have your team idle. You have to have money coming through. So that's where we always like to film with the middle range ones where they were, and sometimes anything for buck ones, but you could fill these little gaps in. So your team was always busy. And that was, man, it was like a big puzzle, and that makes it really challenging. But if you just have these big ones, you'd have these big highs and big lows, like the real valleys where you don't have cash coming in, but you don't want your team sitting idle. They get bored and all that. So you want the money coming through the door. And so you'd have this mix of some big, some small, some medium, and you're hoping that you can just figure out the timing of the deadlines to make it work. That's where, like you're saying, like those little ones, there's always some of these ones that work out really well because they'd be kind of fun projects, and it just keeps that cash coming in the door.
Well, what I found out is that I had to really identify the customer better, which means I couldn't do a Motel 6. I couldn't do a Red Roof Inn or anything like that. I had to do more full service, high-end hotels and resorts. And if I got into that family, which means Marriott family, Hilton, Hyatt, those type of things, I could go down chain just a little bit, which means I could go from a Marriott or a JW to a Courtyard or a Residence Inn, because they already had Marriott standards. It was easy for me to move people from cleaning a room in a Marriott to cleaning a room in the Courtyard. Yeah. But if I tried to get outside of a family, yeah, man, it was like chaos, because nobody had the same standards, and management didn't understand hotels the same way. It became an administrative nightmare that I couldn't keep up with. Right. Yep. I mean, I couldn't go train lower level hotel managers.
Yeah. And that's where it's sort of the same issue we had. Like when you get to that administration where you're doing like all the other stuff that you don't really think about can chew away at your profit. And that's the thing that sometimes was like in a business, you just have to have money coming in the door. Like you have to have that revenue. Yeah. But it's the profit. It's the revenue, profit, cash flow. It's like the cash flows you have to have or you die. The revenue has to cover that. but then there's that final one of profit. And so sometimes you could have a really big job, and those weren't often the ones that were the highest profit. They're sometimes the biggest risk, because if it starts to go south at all, there's no turning back, and you're chewing in, and you may be digging right into the red on a project, and it's like, we can't turn around now. Some of the small jobs is like small, but man, it was like, man, we made, like, profit wise, we made a ton off of that, and you sort of balance that out. And that's the other challenge is bringing the cash in the door and filling all those gaps, but you have to be profitable at the end of the year, and making sure what all of your expenses are and how are you going to do that. And that comes into all that administration. That all takes time and money to do it, right?
You know what's funny? This actually also applied to the bar restaurants that I ran. And I focused heavily on the day crowd, because I wanted the day crowd to be able to cover the day expenses, right? Just the cost of running the business, the rent, the electricity, all that stuff. If I could get that covered during the day, everything at night was profits.
All gravy at night. Yeah.
All gravy at night. And that's where you made the most money anyway. So my thing was to build up a day crowd. That's where I would get these golf groups and things like that. And I would encourage people from, local golf courses around wherever we were at to come in afterwards. Right. Yeah. Come in afterwards, bring your group. But what happened with that is that I ended up getting this group of retirees at each place, and they were spread out across the city of St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I would get guys in their 60s, 70s, 80s that would come in, and if only for 2 or 3 hours, right? And they didn't spend a lot of money, but they just liked hanging out with each other, and it was enough to cover the daily expenses of the bar.
Nice.
That way, when everybody got off work and there was a happy hour and anything that happened that night, it was gravy. So it was the same thing. That the customer mix was, I have to have customers every hour that I'm open, or at least enough to cover the hours that I'm open for the operating expense.
Yeah.
Or that's why you see some people don't open it until 4, because they can't get enough customers to come in before 4:00.
Yeah. And it reminds me of an article I read a few years ago about a shopping mall. And it was the strategy of the shopping mall. The way they looked at it, or sort of the simplistic way they phrased it, is, how do we keep cars in our parking lot? Because you could get to, if they all came at once and slammed the parking lot full, and the parking lot's full, nobody else is going to come, right? Yeah. So what they would do is say, well, how do we keep like just a solid amount of cars in that parking lot? And then we start to realize, well, that's why they have the casino. That's why they have the bars. Because it's almost like, maybe not total 24 hours, but it's like the mall's closed, the stores are closed, but you have cars in the parking lot and you have people coming in. And it was just this way of them visualizing that you've got this, trying to fill every hour of every day, bringing some money in, even though they're not all like this high profit, super high traffic time.
Yeah, that's really interesting about cars in the parking lot. All right, first of all, my dad had a rule: if there were no cars in the parking lot of a restaurant, you don't go there. It's kind of social proof that nobody else likes it either. But but it's interesting because I've seen that. I actually seen a mall, and I want to think that it was my hometown, and a mall that's closed now. But I think that they had a car lot adjacent to the mall, right? Okay. That sold new and used cars. And I think that occasionally they park cars in the actual mall parking lot, right? Because you don't want it to be empty. You want people to come in. But it makes a lot of sense. But I mean, that's why you'll see a rental car place, or even Tesla now is selling in malls, but they'll have a place that just has Teslas in it, right? With a Tesla charger, but they're actual. I mean, that's an interesting observation.
It's just a kind of an interesting philosophy, but it just sort of taking a broader look at how you bring these different channels in and fill this up with different types of customers.
Yeah, because my hometown mall growing up had both an arcade, right? So kids would come there. I mean, that doesn't bring you cars, but somebody's got to bring them there. So there's always traffic going in and out. And then they also had a movie theater, right? Yeah. And then their anchor store will say, not the big names, but they added on a Kmart into the mall. So I mean, the Kmart's always going to have people or folks driving around and come to the mall. So that's a really interesting.
And malls, I think, are just they're trying to figure this out, because there's some malls. It's a weird industry, because there's some malls that are slammed full of people all the time, and it's this almost 24-hour a day shopping and entertainment experience. And then, of course, there's malls all over North America that are down to the last store or two, and they're not going to make it. And I don't know, like, how do you get these winners and losers like that? Right? It's weird.
Are you a mall guy? I mean, do you go to the mall? Do you like it?
Not very often, though. I'm pretty rare, to be honest. But
okay, so I try to avoid it, right? I'm not big on, especially the indoor malls. I don't like. Now there's a mall here in San Antonio, La Cantera, that's outside.
I do like those. I like the outdoor ones where they got nice restaurants, coffee shops, and stuff. Yeah,
exactly right. And I feel like I'm outside. Okay, so excuse me. What they have now is they've got this kiosk that sells beer by the ounce, wine by the ounce, drinks by the ounce. Yeah. You're like, you get like a card from them in the beginning. It's attached to your credit card. Yeah. And you put your card in, you pour out however much you want. And then at the end, you just put the card in whatever tip mailbox you want. I want to tip 15%, 20%, whatever it is. You put the card in, and it closes out your bill.
Nice.
Fantastic. And you can walk all around this outdoor mall with these drinks in your hand. I'm like,
nice.
What has happened in my life where nobody wanted me to ever drink a beer ever in the 80s? Well, because I was underage. But now I can just walk in and out of Anthropology with beer in my hand.
We haven't got quite that progressive up here in Canada, but I know since COVID, you can, there's a bunch of parks where they have, you can drink beer in the park now. Like for a long time you couldn't. So, but what they don't have is you walk up and get one.
Wait a second. Is that true? You can't drink beer in the park? I mean, I've seen the signs, but I've also seen the beer cans.
Technically, legally, you can't drink beer in the park, and until now, legally there's areas where you can drink beer in the park, because I think they realized people just want to be outside and have a drink. So, and the world didn't come to an end when someone had a beer in the park. So, I probably have had lots of beers in lots of parks and didn't even realize it was illegal until they said, "Hey, we're going to legalize it." Oh, didn't know we couldn't have that before. So maybe I don't know how well publicized it was that it was you weren't supposed to have drinks there.
That means I saw the sign, but I thought you tacked that on if I did something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
if I got in a fight and also had beer, then you gave me the beer charge.
Yeah, that's you're not serious about that, are
you? That's fun. Hey, this is a weird thing. All right, so I put this hat on right before this podcast. This is the hat that I used last weekend to work in the yard.
Yeah.
I've never been able to smell a hat on my head before. Oh my God, it reeks. This is I'm embarrassed that I put it on.
Well, it looks just like a hat, but you have to do something about that.
This is going right to the washer.
Yeah, Texas heat right there.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so customer mix, right? So here, this actually did happen to me. A janitorial company, right? That I morphed into a hotel staffing company. But in the janitorial company, I mean, that happens, right? Yeah. It's the annual contract, and you might lose the contract. Somebody underbids you, which I've got to tell you, when you underbid somebody to get work, chances are that you have just created your own problem.
Oh, absolutely. And right? And it never, you hear it all the time, but it never leads to better work, more work, good referrals. Bad leads to bad, good leads to good. So you can never catch up on that.
Yeah, you are going to be buying somebody else's problem, because chances are that incumbent goes, oh my God, there's no way I would do it for that amount of money. They already know all the skeletons, right? They know where where all the cobwebs are and what's going on. So, but that did happen. This customer mix thing did happen. We were trying to make it, and the contracts were larger. So we're talking, anywhere from $6,000 a month to $60,000 a month in janitorial work. I mean, the huge contracts. So
yeah,
any given one, like the University of Missouri at the time, and this is way back early 2000s, I think it was 28,000 a month for 9 buildings only. So when you lose that, I mean, at the time, it's like 30 jobs. When you lose that, what do you do with 30 jobs? Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a huge hit all the way around, because either I have to absorb them in a new contract or other places around, or I got to pay unemployment. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another thing that kind of kicks in the staffing business.
And too often you see it a lot in government organizations or really large organizations where they'll, I think, mistakenly have a policy of just going with the lowest bid, or the weighting of the contract. The largest weighting by far is to the lowest bid. And what happens is you end up with companies in trouble, and they're losing money and want to leave the job that they stupidly bid too low. And then they generally are going to get really crappy work, because if it's not profitable, companies are going to cut every corner they can. So it's defeatist on both sides.
Yeah. All right. So if you were starting a business today, first of all, I actually like the idea of not starting a business, especially that requires bigger customers, until you already have a customer. Just don't start it like going like, oh, well, I've got XYZ in my pocket. I'll start the business to support his. That way you almost instantly have revenue coming in day one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
But that means you're also absorbing the risk of losing that customer. And to me, I'm like going, that risk is less than starting from scratch and then having to go find a customer.
Yeah. I like when I started my very first business, which, grew into a creative agency, it was me, myself, and I. And my top goal was go get a contract, and everything else was as cheap as I could do it. So my first business, and it's funny because I had friends of mine that, like, I took a design degree, and that's, so I started a design business and it morphed into a little more broad than that. But I went out and I had friends that started business at the same time, graduated university, I'm going to start a business. And what they would do is go get a bank loan and buy like the freaking nicest like machines and towers and software and build like this office, a design studio. And they're like, okay, I'm ready to go. Yeah. And crickets. And I went the opposite way. I bought a laptop. I got some kind of educational licensed software from some friends, loaded her up my laptop. And the idea for me was, I got to get some work. So I would be going out banging on doors. And I basically did this at the same time I landed my first contract. I kind of got this, and then I used the laptop. I would go into these meetings, flip open this nice looking laptop, and I would kind of show them my thing, and I'd have my portfolio, and they'd be like, this guy's dialed in. They had no idea. It's like, that's all I own, that laptop. And when I get home, I'm designing it on the laptop, which sucks, but I'm doing it. And that's how I got started. And it was all about, I still remember getting the first contract, and I don't know if it was before or after I got this laptop. That was it. That's all I had. And then it started to grow and then grow. And then I hired staff and it just grew, but it was all about getting the job. And the focus was all about getting the contract and then making sure I delivered. And even though I had this shitty little laptop to do the work on it.
I did the same thing in the hotel staffing company. I tried to expand outside of hotels into restaurants. Okay. So if you're out there listening, don't do that. But it was like, I was like, oh, I can do this. I mean, I got this dialed in. I got the hotels, I got this thing. I mean, but I tried to expand the business and open up another channel in a place that I thought I also knew, which was restaurants. Yeah, because I forgot that restaurant people don't have any money. So what I did was I ended up taking a lot of the money that I was making in the hotel staffing company and putting it towards, this restaurant arm where people never paid me, and I ended up, it ended up settling for like half the invoice amount, or even 25% or something like that. So I actually got beat on that.
Yeah.
But it taught me a big lesson about, how to protect myself in those type of situations, right? With
Yeah.
just I really got beat. I
Oh,
got beat on that.
yeah.
I didn't get beat for long. I got beat for a month, and I'm like, going, oh, you're not going to pay? I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
That's I will say to anyone that's starting a business, I don't care what kind of business it is, especially like a service business like the ones I had. And it's like you know, like everyone's like, well, you make your money on the superior product and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's a prereq. You know where you make sure you make your money? It's on the contracts, your payment terms, your follow-up, your like it's getting the money in the door. And it's a hard lesson the first few times. And then you become like an expert on negotiations and contracts and cash flow and making sure you always have, it's always about having leverage. Like if you can walk out the door, you say like, yeah, you don't pay me this last bit. I'm not delivering all this stuff that you've already paid 90% for. That's, you have to have that, because if you do, like the worst thing is people come in like, yeah, I'll just do the job and then they'll pay me for it. No. That's how you lose your shirt. Right.
Exactly what happened, right? So I mean, I've got all this payroll out. He's not paying. You have to cut him off. I mean, you just absolutely have to cut that off, because it's a bigger hole that you're going to create, and especially when I ended up having to settle. And that's after a lawyer's letter, like going, hey, you're not going to pay. This is, I've already cut off the service. It still took me 6 months to get half of what he owed.
Yeah. It's awful. And it's, those are really hard lessons learned. And, you know, like I know when we've talked with businesses and, you know, cause sometimes we'll have business owners come in and they're really concerned about their cash flow, and we'll just, you know, just talking with them and you find out, you know, the struggles they have getting the cash in the door. And I remember one I've probably even mentioned on the show before, but it was a plumbing business, and they do some really big commercial jobs. And then they started to go into a residential, and residential was where they're having a hell of a time getting paid, because they would do the same thing that they would do with these big commercial jobs. They would go in and do this little itty bitty job, weren't documenting it right, and then they would mail it an invoice and then hope that they get paid this small amount, and it's never big enough to really go after. And what transforms the business is when they have some systems in place, but the most important thing is the phone with a Stripe card. And it's just like, yeah, I'm you know, you're paying while I'm here with your credit card. Suddenly, you know, they right up front, it's like, yeah, we'll be there. You can pay with credit card. You agree? Yes. And just getting that money in the bank, even though you got to pay a little bit of credit card fees, is monumental difference for them.
You know, what's funny is I do consulting right now. And when you talk about that, people always say, well, why are your fees per hour so high? I'm like, well, we can reduce them if we have a minimum per month. Well, why is that? I said, because I'll block off time on my calendar for you, right? I mean, all you're doing is buying time. I mean, if you just want to go by the hour, well, then you're going to pay a higher, because you're going to come in, you know, just for that hour.
Yeah.
But if you want my time, if you want me to work on a project, let's book the time and pay in a larger amount and pay up front.
Yeah.
If we go over, and if you go over, then we'll bill the over.
Yeah.
It's a hard concept for people to understand that. Listen, I mean, you know, when you're working with a consultant or a trainer with like me now, if I commit my time to you, that means it's not available for somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't participate or you don't take advantage of those hours, like going, I'll save every Wednesday, and you only pay if you show up. Well, if you don't show up, then I've lost an opportunity of an hour's worth of work from somebody else.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's a crazy deal. So that's why I've done in consulting now, is just like going, hey, listen, yeah, it's by the hour at a high rate. And if you don't show up, well, you know, it is what it is, because it'll average out, which means if I get you to show up half the time or 30% of the time, my hourly rate for the year is back to where I want it to be.
Yeah.
Assume you're only going to be there 30% of the time, 25%.
Yeah. It's amazing the sort of games businesses have to play just to get paid what they're owed. And and you and I see, like, we're in the software world, we're in SaaS, where like there is systems all over the world that help money move back and forth, payments, all sort of, you know, everything. But the big stopping point is a person still has to initiate that payment. They have to push go on it. And they're the ones that will stop those all the time. So like the little ones are automatic. A lot of the times those will just go, but you get to these other ones and it's especially the bigger ones, you still, it doesn't matter how automated it is. There's someone that can put a stop on it and someone that has to say yes to it. And it's really hard to get a company to automate big payments. They just won't. So you can have the technology, all the technology in the world, it's still going to be late.
Yeah. All right. So what's the most you've been beat out of from a customer not paying you?
Not paying me. Oh boy.
I mean, from one customer you had to write off X amount. You're like, God, I just hated writing that off. But
yeah, I couldn't even tell you if it would be. It's in the thousands. Like for probably a single job we didn't get paid for, it's gonna be in the thousands. I don't know what it is right now. Like that was going back a lot of years now. And because like I would say if we didn't get paid for something, it was probably more the first few years, because after that we just had so many, like I said, we held our leverage, we had contracts in place, we got money, progress payment, money up front. They were committed. They didn't want to hold out because they were committed, which meant we lowered our risk. So you're going back probably 20 years to where I really got screwed on something. There was always little things, a few thousand here and there, but still like a chunk of money, right? I guess. But those are the ones that we learned our lessons and did everything we could to make sure that cash was flowing.
Well, that's the cool thing about the last 20 years is a lot of that's been minimized, mitigated, right? Mm-hmm. I think my largest one was like 13 grand, right? That I had to write off. So, but that's a chunk of change that back then I was counting on it, right? I needed it. So
you're counting on it to pay your staff. You're counting on it to pay your bills. Like margins are tight. And at the end of the year, and the worst part is, this still chaps me. And, I know you're going to be pissed about it too, is you would have paid tax on that money.
You always pay tax on that money because it's earned revenue.
Exactly. So you pay tax on money. The only ones that are getting paid is the bloody government. And then later on, they give you this great, ability to write off the loss like a year after or whatever. It's like, come on, guys, like you've already got your money out of us. It's just,
I mean, you get the opportunity to write off. You determine when it's uncollectible, right? And write it off then.
But it's never right away. It's never like the day of, like it I don't know. Like for me, it was always, because we wouldn't really follow. It was always a tax time.
You always hope you'll be paid, right? Like,
you always hope you'll be paid.
I'll get something out. I'll get this. Maybe you'll make payments over the next 10 months, whatever it is.
Yeah. We don't want to let anyone off the hook right away, right? Like, oh shit, no, I'm just not going to take that money, right?
So I had a client, that was $30,000 a month. They were behind 3 months, so I'm out 100, right? And they're beating me on quality. I think I told this story before about how the guy yelled at me across the table and says, "You shut up."
Yeah.
I'm like, because I said, well, you've told everybody in the world you had a problem, but not me. You told your boss, you told your AR people, you told the president of the company, but you never told me you had a problem.
Yeah.
When were you going to tell me? I can fix it. I can fix everything you just said. I said, here's one thing. Can you fix? Can you actually pay the bills? You haven't paid me in 3 months. And everybody in the room went silent. Like, oh my God, we brought this guy in here, was beating him up for an hour, and we haven't paid him in 3 months, and we owe him 100 grand.
Yeah. That's just brutal.
Yeah, can you imagine? And I was so nice and polite and kind about it, because it's a huge corporation, and I didn't want to make anybody, upset, but I think his complaints stopped the payment somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. He probably says, don't pay them until we fix this. And it just went on and on and on.
And on and on. Yeah. It's amazing that, like, when you get a big enough organization, it's the left hand doesn't know, like, not talking to the right hand. Like you get to, like, the two scariest, legal and accounting, so you got to talk to either. And it's, and I know we've had some contracts that have like dragged on. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, even with dry run, they dragged on because it goes from like down to like department over here, but the person you're dealing with is way over here. And there's all these little things, and it's all this communication. And it's like, well, you're trying to get, so one of the things we learned is we just got to give them way more payment options. So just make it easy, really easy. And I know there was one company I was sort of chasing down, and then all of a sudden in our account, like you could have just sent an email and said, yeah, it's going in next week or tomorrow or something, because like I'm wasting my time, your time, everybody's time. Not, and then also it's like, seriously, you just didn't even like tell me it was coming. Like, oh, you just make it just things tough, like just complicated, right?
But and at the time, back to this concentration deal, at the time, their 30,000 a month was only about 10% of the revenue. Yeah. So I didn't notice it as much. You're like, going, because I've got every other client out there kind of paying and doing their thing. That's a huge client, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't overwhelming. Now, if I'd have lost them, I'd lost 10% of the revenue.
Yeah. And like that's something that we're always telling our clients, like that's something that a big part of big part of dry run is staying on top of those age receivables, like those overdue invoices, because statistically your chance of recouping that money goes down every day, but basically every month. And when you get past 90 days, the chance of getting that money is infinitesimal. And I don't really know why, like they still owe you money, but if you've been following up and making sure, you still might not get the money, but before you've stressed yourself to month 2, month 3, month 4. So at least you're cutting it off before it gets out of hand, right?
Like what you said there, this was 2000, 2001. The tools weren't in place. They're here now. There's no reason. Then you're like, what do you mean they haven't paid us? We didn't. It's like you're surprised, like we didn't get their check yet. You don't have that same excuse now. You'll know the day it's due if it's there or not.
Yeah, exactly. Electronic payments are just a godsend because no one can say the check's in the mail. It's like, it's going to be deposited and it wasn't. So, pretty much immediately. And usually if these electronic payments, it seems to get into the process and just sort of go. And that's a really nice thing. And it's giving lots of options for your customers to pay, but also giving them like the most reasonable ways. And there's times like, credit card payments are you have to pay a little cut. You got to pay your little percentage back to the credit card, but there is something really worthwhile about, making sure that money's coming in the door. And for us, for a SaaS business, it automatically charges the card every month. And if you have to send invoices out, it's like, man, there's a point where it's really worth the benefit. If they're paying a large amount for the annual, like upfront, yeah, it's a little different. Maybe it is like, maybe we'll do ACH or something else here or there. But but credit card can actually be a real benefit to just make sure you're getting the money in the door.
Yeah. I mean, getting money faster and knowing that it's due and knowing that you got it or didn't, I mean, that's a big deal. So, Hey, guess what? MikeandBlaine.com. That's our website. Website visitors, traffic is moving up. People are going there. Why are they going there? They can see us on YouTube. They can listen to our podcast. They can buy merchandise. They can buy our books. They can even
a shirt, like what's right over here. Oh,
did you get a shirt? Did you get a shirt?
I'm gonna be wearing it in one of our upcoming episodes. So a little sneak preview there. But number 50, number 50, I've got a shirt I'm gonna throw on. So
all right, so I can't wear that one. I have to wear something different, so people know there's more than one shirt.
Yeah, if you want, but it's cool shirt. So I don't know. Where would you want?
All right. So go to mikeandblaine.com, check out our merch, check out our books, and check out Dry Run. If you haven't done that, you've got a small business, you want to look at cash flow, Dry Run is the place to go for you now, but you're focused though on kind of a specific size company. Is that right?
Well, usually the entry point is businesses that are over $1 million in revenue. Doesn't mean you can't use us if you're a smaller business, but that's just where we find it's the multi-million-dollar businesses, because where other tools will start to fall apart, we just really deal well with sophisticated problems and complex problems. And we have a flexibility that no one else has. So that's why CPAs are using us. That's why CFOs are using us. And that's why business owners that have a really good handle on their finances are using us, because we give them the tool that keeps them out of a spreadsheet, saves them hours a week, and they can actually understand and explain what they're looking at.
Right on. Hey, what'd you learn today? Anything?
Well, we both like stouts, so that's something there. It was just well, one thing that isn't ringing in my mind was this the 8%. That was a generalized level. You don't want a customer that's over 8%. And that was, I've never heard that number before, and I thought it would be higher. So that was really good. It'll ring true in my brain for a long time.
And what I liked was when you were talking about the minimums. I still want to learn more about how do we calculate that? How can we help other people understand what a minimum customer should look like for their business? This is going to be different. So it got me thinking about how do we present that better?
Yeah. And that maybe is a topic to look at, because it is something to really dig into and figure out for your business. How should and there's also there's probably a whole area there of a little bit of getting in depth on some pricing minimums. How do you actually dig under the hood a little bit and understand where you're losing money, where you're making money? It's like those little things that just drain your cash, drain your profit. So yeah, it may be an interesting topic we'll tackle one of these days.
Yep. All right. So, hey, you've been listening to Nobody Told Me with Mike and Blaine, and we just we went through it. We tackled it. We told you about it, which is why it's important to maintain a good a customer mix for your business, because it can kill your business. The wrong mix can kill your business. So Blaine, good one. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's going to be looking forward to next week, number 43 next week. So make sure you come and join us. We're going to be live on YouTube and of course, everywhere else, YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can find your podcast, you're going to find Mike and Blaine.